I always remember Susan Storm not being too impressive with her invisibility powers until she uh, she got to have the barriers and force fields that she would make, and they had those pretty much right away in the show that I watched as a kid. The like late 80s, early 90s Fantastic Four, and it's been in the movies and stuff. And right now she can only turn invisible, so I was wondering exactly what they would do. But she gets to be really awesome in this episode or this issue of Fantastic Four. I'm talking about Fantastic Four issue number 3, all the way back from, what was it, March of 1962? Anyway, this is MJ. I love comics, and I'm journeying through the Marvel Universe. I invite you to join me as I discover new things about it, like the fact that the Fantasticar and their costumes and their Baxter Building, they don't call it Baxter Building, but their HQ in a high rise, all debuts in this third episode. Did I already see the costumes? Anyway, it's interesting how it kind of took Lee and Kirby a little bit of ramping up time to get them to this standard. But by the third issue, they are basically superheroes. They have their superhero costumes. Their identities are still public, which is an interesting dynamic, I think, for the time. But anyway, I thought it was really neat. They had a supervillain with Mole Man in the first issue. The second issue was weird because it was the Kree. But this issue, they have, I would say, a real legitimate supervillain in the Miracle Man. And yeah, I'm not going to spoil it. I want people to read these. I just kind of want to highlight the coolest things from these comics. So I enjoyed this a lot. I started reading it on my own, and then one of my kids came over, and I started reading to them. And I think it was enjoyable for everybody. I certainly enjoyed it. But anyway, I kind of geeked out on how cool the cutaway was to their building. You see a launch pad. You see they've got a helicopter, a little rocket, a pogo orbit plane. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool. Then they've got their Fantasticar, which there's a great bonus to the Fantasticar. It looks kind of dumb when you see it just from afar, but when you get to see how extensive that thing is, it is really cool, and it makes sense why it's designed the way it's designed. And I really like that. They also have a rocket. Excuse me, they have a missile, which is a launch pad in their building, and they can shoot themselves to like anywhere on the planet in minutes, which is amazing. Very, very cool. A little ridiculous, but ultimately awesome. But it's funny. In this issue, like I said, Sue was like a big deal. She made their costumes for them. But more than that, as they're facing the Miracle Man, they're having a very difficult time, and he bests everybody else. She uses her invisibility powers to become invisible and basically infiltrate his... Well, she gets to spy on him, and she puts herself on the line, which is why I'm so impressed with her. But she also... it also shows that these guys, as they currently are right now, read Johnny and Ben or Thing, because he has a very strong duality where he basically says, like, yeah, I'm the Thing and I want to go back to being Ben Grimm. They just can't get along without her, at least now. I hope that as the comics age, or as the characters age through the books, through the years, that the others will become a more cohesive team, and that they won't need her as desperately, to play Den Mother or whatever you want to say. But I do think it's an interesting dynamic, and I like the fact that while she is, offensively the weakest of the characters, she is morally, she is the strongest character of all of them. And, her powers may be lacking, but she personally has a great, fortitude, will, reflex. Sorry, I've been playing KOTOR. Just like she's a better person than the rest of them, basically. And she can help hold them together and make peace between them. And that's pretty interesting. That makes her really cool. Plus, like I said, she really put her life in danger and did it without question. And something interesting, too, was that Johnny was all upset because his big sis was in danger. But Thing was just like, nah, Sue is going to be fine. And, basically, we just have to be ready to, help her when she calls for us. But, let's let her do this on her own. And that's kind of interesting because you would think a big, tough guy like that would say, like, oh, we got to protect the little lady. But that's not what he's saying. It just kind of runs counter to the standard narrative, you would imagine. Anyway, to recap, the review is this was an excellent issue of the comic. Very fun. Sue is a great character. Really like her. Interested to see how things proceed in the future. Oh, and then there's a thing at the end about Johnny Storm, which I'll talk about in a following issue. Don't want to talk about it now. But one more thing is I wanted to say I really like that they present the way she turns invisible in two ways. She's either all white with no shading at all, and it's like perforated or dotted lines around her, outlining her. And then they also paint her like she's glass. So she maintains her shadows. Or the shading on her, but it's black, and then the rest of her is like this blue-white. It's a little more opaque. I wish you could see through her. Like in the junkyard scene, she looks like that, and I wish she was a little more opaque, or a little more transparent, I should say. I think that would really sell the effect even better, because otherwise it looks like she's glass, or like she could almost be confused for Iceman. Although, it's been a while since I've looked at the X-Men comic. Last Iceman I saw was in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, like last week. Showed that to the kids. They like that. Anyway, so I'll be interested to see how Kirby continues to develop her Invisible Girl look. I do like both looks. The painted glass one seems a little cooler. Although I'm sure it's harder to do. I wanted to take some time to highlight some, I'm going to call them gags, and it'll be interesting to see if things like this pop up in every single issue, at which point I will officially dub them gags, or maybe stunts, I don't know. But Sue, despite the fact that she's invisible, that does not mean she's completely indetectable. She's in a junkyard following around the Miracle Man, and a junkyard dog sniffs her out and starts barking at her, and he realizes, hey, dogs do not bark for no reason, so she must be here somewhere. And he kind of follows the dog, and it leads him to Sue, and that was pretty cool. Another thing is, in the junkyard, somehow, the three guys are able to get, they're antique racing cars that are stored there. Okay, that makes sense. They're stored at the junkyard for some reason, even though they're not junk. Anyway, the Miracle Man ends up shooting out one of the tires of this antique racing car that they're in, and Reed Richards, genius, brilliant man, has the idea that he is going to form his body into the shape and consistency of a rubber tire. And I don't know if he's using, it looks like both of his arms are there, so it looks like there's spokes. Maybe those are his legs or something pressed against his body. I don't know. But it's a crazy image, and it was hilarious to me. I think earlier he turned himself into like a bouncing rubber ball, which was pretty cool. But then now he's turned, like his face is facing out on the tire. Like you would think his face would be facing in so that it's not getting, dirty or smushed or, stuff in his eye. I don't know. Ridiculous. Hilarious. I really liked it. And then the big bright idea, oh, that was a pun, unintended, sorry, that Johnny has for defeating Mastermind as he's escaping in an atomic tank. This was 62. I don't know what these people were doing, just throwing atoms and everything. But anyway, and like that's a big deal. Like Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, so we know that atomic stuff is bad, and yet they, Kirby and Lee are like, oh yeah, the U.S. is definitely developing atomic tanks. We need it to go fight the Koreans. Anyway, I don't know when the Korean War was, but just thought it would be funny to throw in there. Anyway, so they're in this, like, I guess it's an impenetrable tank. Also, he probably doesn't want to ignite the nuclear, whatever ordnance in there, and he probably also doesn't want to cook his sister alive. So, or the Miracle Man, because Johnny Storm doesn't kill people, right? Anyway, so he goes ahead and he just burns as brightly as he possibly can, and he makes a bright flash that actually blinds and dazes Miracle Man for a moment or two, and then they're able to apprehend him, which was pretty cool. But when they've apprehended him, Thing is so furious that Miracle Man made a fool of the Fantastic Four, that he endangered Sue's life, all these things, that Thing is gonna kill him. He's seen how strong Miracle Man is, but at this point, Reed is pretty sure that Thing walloping Miracle Man with all of his might will kill him. So it's interesting. They show Johnny like just pitifully trying to stop him, and then Reed ends up, wrapping up his limbs a little bit and causing him to stop hitting the Miracle Man, which, like I said, would have killed him. And that's interesting. The image. One, it's a cool image because he's Ben's winding up and Johnny's like collapsing, draping himself over him, trying to put himself in between Miracle Man and Thing, while not getting clobbered himself. And then, Reed comes in and stretch. I just like the layout of the panels. It really tells the story. It sets up the sequence in time and makes you feel the action, which is good. But also, it kind of represents the like what's going on with Ben Grimm, I guess you could say. And I think it does a really good job of framing him as this, just barely in control individual. And I like that. I like the idea that maintaining his humanity is such a struggle for thing. And gosh, I think it's really good. I'll go ahead and I guess I talked about it in my Spider-Man review when Spider-Man fought Doctor Doom, or rather, in I think his first or second issue when he went into audition to be a member of the Fantastic Four so he can get a paid gig. When he left, because he did tangle with all of them a little bit, when he left, they said something like, "We only hope that young man, doesn't turn against the world because, heaven help us if he does." And they've made a similar comment about Ben, Sue, Johnny, and Reed. And at the end of this issue, I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. It's my thing. Johnny ends up leaving the team, and he is very upset, and they're wondering if they need to worry about him, and they're wondering legitimately how the three of them could stop him because his flame is so powerful, he can fly, all this stuff, and it's pretty interesting. So it's very dramatic. I like the stakes that they're setting up and the conflict, so a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to reading the next issue. I'll talk about that later. I was going to complain about not getting the Kylo Ren issue this week because I refused to pay those highway robbery prices for digital comics, and my comic shop was sold out because I went like 4 or 5 days later. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Really like this. I'm enjoying Fantastic Four so far. They haven't done anything to bother me. Except I don't like how Johnny's drawn, but that was like, a cool young guy at the time, I think. So, what are you going to do? Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Check out mjmunoz.com for more of my work. I'm an aspiring author who will gladly accept your financial support through coffee, or you can buy merch from my Redbubble store. Swinging Through Comics can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and mjmunoz.com/STC. Relevant links are in the show notes. If you had a good time, like and share this. Subscribe and ring that bell to catch me next time I'm swinging through comics. Just as a little bonus, who's your favorite member of the Fantastic Four? And what do you think about the Fantastic Car and those cool cutouts on the building? I also liked in the Spider-Man issues where they showed how his web shooters work and different details of his costume. All that stuff really gets to me. Probably the sci-fi nerd in me.